Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie O'Leary. Got another episode with a lot to talk about. We're going to preview Scrimmage number 2, which is tomorrow. I did a deep dive into the schedule. I know we've all talked about who's on the schedule, but I kind of wanted to talk schedule structure because I think the deeper you go into it, the more favorable it looks for Rutgers. We have some recruiting updates and ranking updates from rivals. But first, this podcast, like always, is presented to you by Night and Day Apparel. Beat the heat this summer with our hot one-of-a-kind products. With temperatures rising, there's no better time to refresh your wardrobe with cool and stylish summer essentials. Whether you're planning a beach getaway, picnic in the park, or simply lounging in the yard, we've got you covered. Visit our website today to explore a full range of summer essentials from pool floats and spatulas to bathing suits and tank tops. If you use our promo code RutgersRivals, you can get 10% off your purchase, and you can use that as many times as you want. Shop now and keep shopping. Now, I do have the Loud Cup from Night and Day Apparel. I'm not going to blast into this thing, but it is so loud and obnoxious that you're probably going to hear these tooting off in the tailgate lots this year. It's got the speaker itself comes through the bottom. There's a tube. There's two little spouts. The first one that has the smaller spout is for making noise. The second one's for drinking. And you just basically blow into that, and it makes a really, really loud noise. It's like a damn train whistle. So I'm not going to do that to you listening at home. But if you want to be the most obnoxious person in the tailgate lots this year, get a Loud Cup because they're not lying. They are really loud, and it is going to be one of the more unique things you could own as a fan.
I will also say their unofficial blackout t-shirts came out.
That's right.
Why not us? I kind of like that. Pretty solid. Technically it doesn't have a block guard. It's the only downside, but for $26, and you use the promo code, I think it comes down like 24, something like that. But it seems pretty cool. And then we also have a special sale on the Night Claw crew neck. Now I know it's still summer, so I don't want to jump too quickly into fall and winter, but pretty cool crew neck especially if you like White Claws. So it's also not popping up. Here we go. There it is. And it's only $20 right now. So almost half price, but pretty close.
Yeah, and with our discount, it's $18. So
there you go. So we are very close to half price. But
so let's talk about this scrimmage. Obviously, they have 2 scrimmages in fall camp before they start doing game week prep. Yep. This is going to be the second and final scrimmage. What are you hoping to see in scrimmage 2? What's your pie in the sky hope for scrimmage 2?
I want to see the wide receivers kind of start to separate themselves. We saw glimpses of it. We know Dymere Miller has been raved about by everyone. We did an article with Shaquan Loyal that's coming out later today. He actually raved about Chris Long. We've heard Ian Strong talk. We've seen Ian Strong on some of their commercials, if you want to call it that, on Twitter and stuff like that, social media posts. We've heard some people talk about Nassim Brantley, specifically Shiano. So I want to see someone step up and just grab that wide receiver 2 job by the reins. I don't think it's a secret right now. Dymere Miller's a starter. I don't think it's a secret right now that Christian Tremel's a starter. It's that last spot that's really up for grabs. I've seen people on social media say that Nassim Brantley's locked in. I don't see that at all. but yeah, I do want to see someone step up and grab that job. I want to say Ian Strong's probably the front runner. It's really hard to tell, but either way, they're going to use a ton of receivers. Benjamin Black's been a guy they raved about too. Everyone has an obsession with Corey Duff because he's just tall, lengthy, and got good size. So he's another one to keep a close eye on. Probably won't be the starter, but we'll probably see some reps this year. So that's at least on the offensive side. I really want to see someone step up there. And then in a similar boat, I want to see, because you don't want to see the defensive line create too much pressure because that means your offensive line's struggling. Yep. But I want to see someone step up there, and then I also want to see someone step up at the cornerback spots. We know Robert Longerbeam is a dude. He's cornerback 1. We know Eric Rogers has shown some flashes last year as cornerback 3 last year, stepping up to cornerback 2 this year. He's pretty much locked in because Greg's mentioned in the past that he is your starting corner. But after that, there's a big question mark. Bo Mascow played 1 game last year. There's a lot of hype around him from the staff and all that. Al-Shadi Salam's a guy who has one of the top fastest guys on the team. So I'd like to see someone step up there. That's pretty much it, though. It's everything else is kind of locked in, and that's kind of a given based on the fact that everyone's returning for the most part.
Yeah, you just hope nobody gets hurt, nobody gets dinged up. Do you expect to see a lot of starters, or do you expect to see more of depth guys for the majority of the scrimmage?
I think in the beginning you'll see a lot of starters. You got to remember this is the last hurrah before the game time. So this is kind of like it. Like you might see a good chunk of the starters. I'm curious to see what they say afterwards, or what we're allowed to say afterwards. But it shouldn't be too crazy. You just want to get out of there healthy, and that's pretty much it. Just get ready for game day. You're 2 weeks away. Yeah, 2 weeks away now. So it's coming fast.
It is, and it's less than 2 weeks now. We've hit that
Oh
that
yeah, it's
Rubicon.
Friday. Yeah.
It's on the 29th, and it's Friday now. So wild how quickly it snuck up, and it'll keep on moving. But let's do some recruiting updates and ranking updates, because Rivals just went through and updated a bunch of our commits, and all over they updated their Rivals 250. Who are some notable guys that got recruiting bumps?
So first off, Rutgers actually jumped back into the top 20 for recruiting rankings, which is huge that they're still kind of maintaining this pace. Despite I know we talked about it when they had 30 commitments. It was kind of like everyone else had 12, 15, 16-ish. But they're still able to keep that pace because of how many 4-stars they have. And one of those new 4-stars is Chase Linton, the Georgia defensive end. He goes from 5.73 star to 4-star, so it's not like a crazy big bump, but it's a big bump in general. He's going to be tough to he's going to be tough to hold on to. He just set a visit for Georgia for October 11th, I think it was 12th that weekend. I believe they play Mississippi State. He is a Georgia kid. He grew up a Georgia fan. But Rutgers has put up a good fight. And this is an edge rusher. And edge rushers, as we know, in any level of football, are probably the most valuable.
Yep.
He's just an incredible athlete. Our national analyst got to see him again on Wednesday in his first game of the season. He looks really good, really lean. We have him listed 215. I think he actually got bumped up to like 230-ish. So he is packing on the pounds. He's looking good. Who else? Where am I looking? Jarek Gordon, an offensive lineman from Florida, got bumped up a little bit. He was a 5.63 star to now a 5.73 star, one step closer to 4-star status. Jakarion Keenan, the South Carolina defensive back, who we really don't talk about a lot for some reason, but certified stud, 5.53 star up to 5.73 star. There was someone else, and I can't remember who it was, but for the most part, a couple guys got bumps. I feel like there's one more, and I just really can't remember.
Chase Linton?
No, that was who I just said. Yeah, I said Chase Linton. I said Jarek Gordon. There was a third one. I can't remember who it was, but
Michael, or was it the receiver? It was
no, Michael Thomas was always a 5.73 star. Either way, these guys keep getting power 4 offers too. That's also a problem. Braxton Kyle got a Georgia offer. He's want something to watch there. Isaiah DeLoach got a North Carolina State offer, a hometown school as well. Got an offer there, although that sounds like it's pretty much a locked, done deal for Rutgers. But it's just interesting to see all these other schools, all these hometown schools, who've had the chance to see these kids multiple times over the years finally offer, just because they, like Isaiah DeLoach, for example, was at NC State 4 times last year, and you didn't offer him once. Now all of a sudden you offer him. It's like, kind of think it's more of like a slight. It's like, dude, like, come on, like I've been there multiple times. You know who I am. Same coaching staff. Like, what's the deal? So
yeah, and then it kind of reminds me of Ben Black last year, where they didn't offer him.
Similar situation.
Rutgers lands him, and then they want him late.
Mm-hmm.
Of the 3 guys who've gotten offers from their home state schools in the last few weeks, you talked about Isaiah DeLoach, you talked about Braxton Kyle, you talked about Chase Linton. On a scale of 1 being not worried at all, 10 being basically they're gone, where would you rank each guy? Let's start with Isaiah DeLoach in terms of your worry about the new offer they got.
I'd say it's more of like a 1 out of 10, maybe.
Okay.
Like, he's just not going anywhere, I don't think. Based on when I was talking to people, they said he let the staff know the minute like NC State even reached out. So that's more of like that's a huge sign, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
Tells you where he feels about Rutgers. He's very locked in now. NC State always pushes for visits. We saw it with Ben Black last year. He took a visit and it didn't really matter because he stayed committed. So I wouldn't be too worried about that one.
All right, how about Braxton Kyle?
That one's a little bit more interesting. So Georgia did lose a defensive tackle in Christian Garrett, who is apparently rumored to go to Georgia Tech, which is wild because he's like a top 250 kid, 4-star, like really good prospect. So I don't know why the hell you would, if you have Georgia and Georgia Tech at the end of the day, like why the hell would you do that?
Either,
Besides the point, they're looking at 2 defensive tackles right now. It was Braxton Kyle, and then there's a JUCO kid who's a Liberty commit in Kelton Mickle. Now that's more of the immediate help, so you would think they're going to pursue the JUCO first because you can just get a body who has college experience, good size already, kind of more of immediate help at that position, a position that is hard to judge as is. So they're probably going to look at him first, but Kyle is right up there on the board, I was told, and like our UGA sports guy, aka the Georgia Rivals guys. They do a great job with their coverage, and they told me that Braxton's right there, so they're going to actually go check him out soon, see what he looks like. They also have a good relationship with North Gwinnett High School, and it's a school that produces talent at a crazy high rate. And after talking to them, I was like, oh, well, is Kyle's like offer committable? Is it not? Like sometimes you see these offers and they could send an offer out and it won't be even committable that day. But they said they would never do that to a North Gwinnett kid specifically, just because it would be such a bad look, and you can't afford to really piss off the the premier program in your state. So it is committable. Supposedly, they're trying to push to get a visit to campus, but they're not the only ones. North Carolina is very, very close to locking in a visit with Braxton Kyle. Now these kids are kind of towing the line as well, because Rutgers is not going to allow visits. They never have under Shiano, or at least 2.0. So it'll be interesting to see if he ends up taking that visit or not. I think these are good enough prospects that if they do take the visit, you can't just drop them. I think you just keep pursuing, and hopefully you could pull like what you did with Benjamin Black, like you said, and just keep him committed.
So 1 to 10, what's your worry level there?
Probably say 6 out of 10.
6 out of 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Chase Linton then. What's your worry level, and kind of what's the latest on him?
That one's scary. Just because he's just at the top of their board right now for edge rushers. I'd probably say a 7 out of 10. I don't want to say 8 because I feel like if I say 8, it's like a guarantee almost. That's my only reason for not going higher. But he already scheduled a visit to campus, like I said before. He'll be there in October, the second week in October, to watch them take on Mississippi State in the little Bulldog Bowl, I guess. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a school. He said, he's like, I grew up watching them. I grew up like that's a team I rooted for growing up. Like I totally get that. Atlanta, Georgia native. Like everything kind of just adds up for him to more than likely probably end up there. Now Rutgers is doing a good job holding him off for now. I just don't know if they're going to be able to hold him off long term. I think if Georgia pushes, if Georgia says, hey, you're our top edge guy, I don't think this one would be considered a slight. I think this is more of it's just they found him, they worked him out, and he had a phenomenal workout at the end of July, and that was it. And they offered, and they've been kind of pretty heavy after him ever since. So this one's going to be a really tough one to hold on to. I think they probably hold on to the other two, but this one's going to be extremely tough.
Well, I think you told me via text, we haven't mentioned on here, that he's still going to make a final visit to Rutgers before
Correct.
he makes a decision. So when do you expect him to be on campus again?
So that's in October, the second week. I would expect it probably to be, I think, what's that game after that? Is it UCLA?
So homecoming is UCLA on the 19th. They play Wisconsin at home on the 12th, which is, from what it sounds like, the day that he'll be at Georgia.
So best guess, probably UCLA. It's not again. I mean, there's obviously one more home game, right? Minnesota.
Yeah, we play Minnesota on the 9th of November, and we play Illinois on the 23rd of November. So there's 2 games after that, but they are fairly far away from his visit to Georgia.
I think in an ideal world, nothing's locked in right now. In an ideal world, you get him versus UCLA just because those other 2 games are meh. Like, you want to get a good crowd. You don't want it to be too cold. You want to just show him what the Rutgers atmosphere really is. So I would say you'll probably get him the week after that and kind of go from there.
Interesting. So a little bit more color on those situations. You got to hope they can hold on to them, but
Mhm.
um, these are good, healthy problems to have.
Yeah.
You've said this time and time again. The days when you were fighting off the Miami of Ohio's, the Temples, the
Losing to the Miami
the
Ohio's?
the random schools in the MAC to hold on to guys is well in the distant past, and now it's national championship contenders who want your guys. So that is certainly a good new problem to have.
Ben Rothar. That was the guy. The tight end
That's
commit
right.
that they flipped from Kent State. Went from a 5.3 2-star. Was very adamant about this one. I had to reach out and push for a little bit, but they watched his tape and they loved him. 5.6 3-star now, so big jump there.
Athletic as hell. I mean,
Yeah.
they're the whole Rivals grading scale is based on professional potential. So when you have numbers like his, you have to kind of take a second look at a guy who plays tight end, especially. So
yeah, dude who's about to earn his 16th varsity letter this year. It's crazy.
So moving on to something different. A few weeks ago, we did our fanhood stories, and we are going to bring on now one of the newer podcasters in the Rutgers sphere, Larry Krayn, who's also on the board. I'm going to have him jump in now. Larry, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, my brother. I know my setup's a little weird because my antiquated audiological skills over here, but I'm happy to be with you.
Oh, it's all good, man.
Too many big words for this pod.
Yeah, you got the Dennis Miller lexicon over here. I don't know if anybody remembers him on Monday Night Football, just dropping 4 or 5 syllable words nonstop. He only lasted one season.
You're showing your age.
Yeah, I know, seriously.
I try to look like I know what I'm talking about, so if I drop more of those words, people will be distracted from my actual, substantive stuff.
There you go.
That's fair. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Larry. How your fanhood started, a little bit about the Night Watch, basically all things Larry.
Sure, man. So my fan affair with Rutgers started, obviously growing up in Jersey, always kind of knew about Rutgers. They're in the background. The football team's okay. Ray Lucas is kind of somebody you know about. And then he gets to the NFL, you kind of know about him a little more. 06 was what really got me hooked. I actually had a friend who I'll tell you guys off air, a close friend who was a college ball player, and he didn't go to Rutgers, but there were some, ins and outs that went on that year with my buddy, and it caused me to focus on Rutgers a little bit more. So I remember the first game. I know you had Mike Teal on talking about the Carolina game, and I remember watching that game and then kind of following the team throughout that season. And that, Louisville game, the whole state, I was 3 years out of high school. So I'm a little bit older. I was 3 years out of high school, and the whole state was just focused on that game, whether you were into college ball, whether you were into Rutgers or not. And I remember being on the phone with a buddy of mine, just watching that entire game on TV, start to finish. My other buddy, who's still a best friend, was waiting outside getting pizza handed to him by Coach Giano. It was ridiculous. His buddy burned his couch on the street after that. So it just kind of snowballed from there. I wound up going to Rutgers, but I went to Rutgers Newark undergrad, and then I went to Rutgers Newark Law School. And I spent a ton of time partying the old Halloween nights and Rutgers Day and all those things in New Brunswick. So it kind of snowballed from there. And then I became a season ticket holder with my family maybe in 2011 or so. Before then, I was going to a bunch of games too. I kind of just got hooked to it, hooked on it. Mostly football. Women's basketball I followed a lot in the beginning because they were actually good. And then when basketball started to gain traction, I got a little more into that. But, from the academic side, having been there undergrad and law school, and then from the athletic side, just being a fan, it's been a long, 20 years or so now. I've been a pretty hardcore fan of the university and the athletics.
Yeah, it's been an up and down 20 years for sure. That kind of mirrors my timeline. I kind of started to get in the middle of 2005 season, 06. I was a senior in high school. We told these stories, so we don't need to repeat it. But yeah, similar timelines there. Tell us a little bit about how you started the Night Watch and kind of what you do on your show.
So this is a kind of an interesting little tidbit. My name, obviously, on the message board, your guys' board that I've been on for years, is Luciato, and that's because I'm a mixed guy, but I'm Italian too. And so my rap name, believe it or not, when I was young, is a Luciano, and I do music. So I had this. This is where this antiquated audio setup comes in because my mic's like routed through an old Pro Tools on an old Mac, and I got a lot going on. But I was a music person when I was a kid, in my 20s, my teens, and so I had the format and the wherewithal to kind of understand audio. I always had an interest in writing, always had an interest in sports. I kind of, once I settled into my career and I was kind of just plateaued and a little bit bored, I wanted to do something else. And so Aaron Brightman, when he was with On the Banks, actually, I don't know if it was on, the forum or somewhere else, somebody posted like an open call for contributors to On the Banks. And they, solicited resumes and writing samples. And I had done a lot of creative writing. I live in Newark. I actually write for a periodical called The Newarker up here, just creative writing and stuff. So I had a little experience writing. I submitted a writing sample. Aaron liked it. He and I got really, really into a good working relationship. I didn't write, consistently, but I wrote quite a bit for him here and there, big picture, articles. And so all of a sudden, because of an article or two, my friends at the tailgate in the Blue Lot would kind of know me and joke with me like, oh, there's a journalist here, even though I'm not, and all this nonsense. So I have a podcast called the Logic and Larry podcast, which is more of a political current events podcast. And I already had the microphone and I already had all the, infrastructure. What I saw was I follow the heck out of you guys. Aaron kind of started his thing, and anybody who would create Rutgers content, you couldn't get enough of it. As you guys know, like after the game, they switch off from coverage pretty quickly. New York, yep. You might have Beck or whatever, a little bit covering it. It's not enough. I crave it so much that, like, especially after a win, all I want to do is listen to Rutgers coverage, recruiting, all those things. And there wasn't enough outlets. I was like, you know what? Let me hop on the mic and see if I can just add content because there's a space there. And so I wanted Nightline, but we know Nightline's taken. So I was like, well, let's do Night Watch. Like, I got to come up with something cool. Did Night Watch, started the YouTube channel, already kind of had the experience in that vein with YouTube too. So I was able to kind of just launch it. And now it's like my editorial opinions just kind of verbalized. And I'm not, you guys know, it's not as consistent as some of the other mediums, but it's out there, kind of more of a hybrid fan journalistic type approach to it.
That's really cool. Yeah, I found, I forget how, I think it was because you posted, somebody posted one of your videos, I think, on the boards, and you got a really good voice for radio for sure. And I was like, oh, this guy's like, actually knows what he's talking about. And then it found out it was, who you were on the boards. And then, I found out about your relationship with Aaron, and we're close with Aaron too. So it sounds like we're all going to potentially get together to do something at the end of the month to tease something that we're all kind of talking about. But Richie, have we ever told the story about how our show started? I don't know if we kind of have.
I don't think so. But
I'm curious about like Mike and that, like how that whole thing happened. I want to know. People want to know. Know. So I want.
It was very much on a whim, basically. Kind of just happened.
So I think somebody asked you and asked the staff, Rich, about starting a podcast, and you had thrown a comment out there, something along the lines of like, we've tried to do it in the past, it's never stuck. I would love to do it. I just don't have like a co-host.
I was so against podcasts. I hated podcasts. I thought they were the stupidest thing in the world. I was like, dude, just listen to music. Like, don't go to the gym and listen to a podcast. What are you doing? Like,
yeah. And me being a total sicko who every time my Spotify rap comes out, it's, I don't know how I fit so many hours of podcasts in my year, but, so I'm like terminally online with podcasts. I had a podcast that we did for our fantasy football league, believe it or not. Like we had this really in-depth 16-team dynasty football league. And, we would do that like once a month, even in the off season. And so I messaged Richie. I was like, hey, I really wanted to do a Rutgers podcast for a while. I do a podcast elsewhere. It's not related to Rutgers. I would, if you're really interested in doing a pod, let's talk. And so exchange numbers. Well, Richie's really great about just being open-minded to like any contributor who wants to come on. Like how many people have hit you up, Rich, about like, hey, like I really love women's soccer. I live here. Like, can I cover the team for you? And you'll be like, yeah, just show me like some kind of, writing sample. And as long as they can form sentences, Richie will give them a chance. So yeah, I think that's kind of what separates Richie as a publisher, is that he's always kind of looking for something new to do and also really open-minded. It's a good kind of nexus there. So we got to talking and we decided, let's go for it. Let's just try and record it. And, we hadn't met in person, Rich, until like 2 years into doing the show.
Yeah, that's crazy part.
And it just kind of worked. There was really no hiccups. There were obviously, like when you start off doing a show and you haven't really done them before, there's going to be some awkwardness, but there wasn't an extreme amount. And, we've been going ever since. I wish there was more to it than that. It was really just me reaching out to him after he made that throwaway comment.
Very simple.
I've been here ever since.
I love it because I think the space that we're in, especially like in our age group, we have this wherewithal, like technologically, to be able to do these things. We have this interest in sports and things, and so it's happening all over. Like it's an emerging space, I think, and it may be beyond emerging at this point. But it's cool. It's cool to hear that that's the relationship between you guys, because I wouldn't have thought that. Like I would have thought, Mike, you were more involved in that professionally and you guys connected in that way. And it's kind of like, hey, I had one. I was doing my Dynasty League podcast. I knew what to do, and I reached out to Rich. And that's something I could say just as like a member on the board. It's definitely like interactive and accessible, like super accessible. You don't get that type of interaction on a regular basis in other places. And I guess, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but Rutgers community in general, like there's that like hardcore fan base, and it's so small, and I wouldn't say small in a negative way, but it's also concentrated in Jersey. And I've gotten, obviously, because I'm at every game, like more and more people come up like, hey, Larry, again. I'm like, it's weird because I'm just in my fan mode, like a weirdo. My hair's messed up. I look like crap. I'm like, what's going on? But it's interesting because there's such a circle that you kind of have to be interactive, and then that begets more engagement. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Richie gets noticed pretty often because he's at the practices. He's up in North Jersey. I live in the Philly area. So Rich, how often do you get noticed now, Rich?
It's like the janitor like in the Hale Center was like, you're that guy. I'm like, I guess so. I took my girlfriend to one of the out of conference games last year because I want to show her she's never been to a Rutgers basketball game. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna go as a fan. We're gonna go sit down. We get tickets. Went and sat down, and like 3 people on the way to sitting down, she's like, oh, I'm with a celebrity. Like, Richie. I'm like, hey guys, you want to buy me a beer?
In that space, bro, you are a celebrity.
It's cool.
Like, it's pretty crazy.
It is cool.
Richie, is it like that in other places you cover too, or is that just exclusive to Rutgers because you're so involved?
I think it's partially because I'm so involved with Rutgers. Also for the sole fact that like you go to I obviously cover Penn State. I go to Penn State practice. There's like 40 different people like covering the same exact thing I am. You go to Rutgers, there's 5. So
it makes sense. Yeah.
And for every like one Steve Politi Rutgers has, how many Steve Politis does Penn State have? Yeah,
like 6, 7.
So they have like full-time, like grizzled, guys who've been covering the team for 30 years, like left and right. So
and it's changing too. Like you saw under Chris Ash, there was legitimately like 3 outlets that are covering day to day. It was like us, 247, and NJ.com. That was it. Now all of a sudden, like this season specifically, you see like 7, 8 people there now, and I'm like, okay. Well, and then you get another big year, you're going to see 10, 12 people, and then News 12 will come every once in a while, and then they'll start coming more often. And ABC, Fox, whatever. I mean, not ABC, Fox, CBS.
And I know it's your guys' show, but I think people just want to hear some of what Richie thinks and knows. This question pops into my head. Did that happen initially as soon as Schiano started in 2019, or has that been gradual as the team has seen more success, that you've noticed that media presence?
It's definitely with more success. When when Schiano first showed up, his press conference, like the Hale Center room that we sit in for press conferences every week, there wasn't a seat available. Like I had to sit like 6 rows back, and I'm like, what the hell, dude? I get front row every time. Like, and I'm here like 5 minutes beforehand usually. But yeah, like before Schiano, like Chris Ash, like legitimately 3 people maybe. Like, and it was like me, like Keith Sargent, maybe a little more than 3, maybe 5. Keith Sargent, James Cratch, and 247, and like it was it really. And it was Chris Heisman too, but it's completely changed. It is going to be fun to see what they do this year in terms of how many people actually show up. You start out the season, say, hypothetically, 3-0. I think that 4-0 press conference before that Washington game could be jam-packed.
Makes sense.
So speaking of potential starts, I did want to go into quickly a little bit deeper on the schedule. So I know that we've all talked about who's going to be actually on the schedule, the opponents that Rutgers has, the opponents Rutgers, more importantly, doesn't have this year. But I was going into it recently. I was like, man, Rutgers seems to like have some really well-timed buys, and I wanted to see like the net rest advantage that Rutgers has on the season. So what that is net rest advantage is something that's really gotten popular in the NFL betting circles. Basically, it's how many more days between games cumulatively do you have over the course of a season than your opponents. So, for example, Rutgers plays Howard on Thursday, August 29th. Their next game is Saturday the 7th against Akron. Akron plays on that Saturday. So there's 2 more days for Rutgers in between those games. So Rutgers would have a net rest advantage of +2. And go on the entire schedule, so on and so forth. Rutgers has a net rest advantage over the course of the season of +16. So that means it has 16 more days of rest cumulatively over all of its opponents than they have. So, like, if you look at specific games that it really stands out, the +7s on the schedule is at Virginia Tech and home against Minnesota. The other thing that I think is really interesting is how many opponents that Rutgers has a bye advantage over the course of the season. So if you notice in that middle column, there's a 0 next to the first 5 opponents. It means the first 5 opponents Rutgers faces, those teams will have not had a bye yet on the season. So Virginia Tech, Washington, and Nebraska we face after our bye, and they have yet to have a bye. Now, that's just important for general like well-being and health. So like a team like Nebraska will be playing its 6th game in 6 weeks as we face them, and they'll have a bye the following week. Washington has 5 straight opponents heading into us, and so on and so forth. UCLA also plays 6 games in 6 weeks. USC plays 6 games in 6 weeks for our game. So there's a lot of teams who are going to be off of long playing streaks, as well as us having just net rest advantage over those teams. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that, and I don't know if you guys have any comments or thoughts on the rest advantage of Rutgers on the season.
So Shiano's 2-1 because 2020 there wasn't a bye week. After a bye week, and that one loss is the Ohio State game where they put up a damn good fight.
Yeah, where we could have arguably won that game if a few things go differently. Christian Dremel gets hit down the sideline for that wide open touchdown in the first quarter, and if that pick 6 by Gavin in the third quarter turns into a field goal, that's a totally different game.
So like he has a good track record of when he has time to prepare, they put up a damn good fight, if not win the game. So I mean, I think that it's interesting because you get it right before Virginia Tech and you get it right before Minnesota, Minnesota maybe not as much, but the Virginia Tech one's huge.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think Shiano certainly cares about this, I think, because he's mentioned it subtly a couple times that I've noticed. And the breakdown is really fascinating to me, just seeing the net positive that we have. I think the schedule as a whole, whether you're looking at, the teams we're playing, the teams we're not playing, but then you incorporate this analysis, it's all there in front of us. We just got to go out and do it. And having it in front of Virginia Tech, Minnesota, a net 1 with Nebraska. I mean, these are winnable games, some might argue. So you got to bank those winnable games, and any advantage and edge you can get. A, we got to exploit, but B, you best believe Shiano's aware of it and is going to try his best to take advantage of it.
Definitely. And the Virginia Tech game reminds me, if we're talking about this kind of as having the potential of a 2006, that reminds me so much of that North Carolina game where our teams seemed pretty evenly matched. It's an early scheduled away game out of conference, and that kind of set the tone because in 2005, if you remember, we had that early season away game at Illinois where we put up a really good fight, but we ended up losing, and that kind of like we never really got over that hump of winning a big time road game. But the following season, when we finally did, that really set the course. It set the confidence level and it set the tone of the entire season. So Virginia Tech, if we want to have the kind of season we're all dreaming of, that needs to be a big time statement win, especially their white effect game that they're going to have. If we win that game, I think the amount of confidence that Rutgers will have heading into the meat of its schedule will be sky high.
I think the Nebraska one's interesting too because I know it's only +1 net, but they don't get a bye, and they're going to have a true freshman quarterback in week 6.
That'll be their 6th game in 6 weeks. They are going to be beat down.
So they're going to be beat down, and either he's going to be finding his groove by week 6, or Dylan Raiola is going to be erratic completely. So
Yep. But That is all I've got for us today. Is there anything else either of you wanted to mention, or anything we should know about, where we could find you, Larry, on social media or on YouTube?
Yeah, sure. So it's on YouTube. It's Night Watch, just spelled like a Scarlet Night Watch. Larry K. If you type Night Watch Larry K, you'll find me. I'm putting out some written content on a different forum these days, so I'll advertise that over on my YouTube. I am kind of getting into the actual podcast space because I'm with my other podcast. I'm there. It's kind of taken some time to migrate. Night Watch is there, but I don't put every episode there because most of my viewership comes from YouTube. But any other major podcast platform, if you search Night Watch and subscribe, it exists, and there'll be more content coming out. I just want to thank you guys for having me. I mean, I'm obviously a longtime listener, a consistent listener, and a participant on the board, consumer of all of your media, Richie, all of your reports. So to be on here is kind of like, wow, I can't even believe that I went from like, hey, let me just start this for fun to being on with you guys. I look forward to being back on with you guys, fixing this setup. I hope my audio still sounded like a radio voice through this phone. And I'm real excited about this season. In all honesty, I think it's going to be great for the community and the school and the team and the fans. And, a lot of anticipation. We'll see what happens, but I'm looking forward to being back with you guys, talking to everybody on my channel. So go over and subscribe.
We're not going to talk about the politics in your political podcast? I'm just kidding.
Well, we don't want to go to the CE board or whatever. You and I.
No, I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't exist. Cut it out.
Can't even find it when it comes up. I go there.
That's good. That's a good thing.
I only go over there when I want to just like lash out, and you guys know who you are. We're friends when we talk Rutgers. I only go there when I'm like just mad and I want to just get crazy on the keyboard.
Hey, feel free to take any topic on that board and use it for the podcast. Just chuck it up there.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you to everybody who listened. This has been another edition of the Night Report podcast. Signing off.